baby trees.
Bonsai. Bonsai.
Bonsai. Bonsai.
Close enough.
The Black Pondo Podcast.
Bonsai. Bonsai.
Bonsai.
Bonsai. Bonsai.
Bonsai.
Yeah.
The Black Pondo Podcast.
Cool. Well, hey, man, I have been a massive fan of your podcast. I feel like you are absolutely crushing it. I look forward to it. I'm so excited to listen to your podcast now. Thank you so much for doing all those interviews and talking with all those people. I feel like you're really getting some bonsai commentary from a wide variety of different people. I love all the guests that you've had. And I think that you do a phenomenal job of asking good questions and creating engaging conversation. So super excited to have you on. Thank you so much for joining me. For those that might not know, would you give just kind of a quick intro on the Bonsai Builders Podcast and kind of maybe what your goals are with the show and what the show's all about?
Yeah. Maybe I'll do a really quick intro on myself as well.
Please.
My name's Addison, for those who don't know, Addison Galambos. I live in San Francisco currently. Been out in the Bay Area for like the last 10 years or so. During the week, I'm a sales engineer at Google, kind of doing tech demos and selling software. And then on the weekends, I'm a bonsai hobbyist. So, have been doing bonsai and trying to get good at bonsai for maybe the last 8 or so years after, as a child, kind of being introduced to it. And the Bonsai Builders Podcast is kind of a recent thing I've started in the last 6 months, which, honestly was inspired by the Black Pondo Podcast and Bonsai Wire and Asymmetry, and hearing these amazing conversations that, were very thought-provoking for me and interesting, and wanting to see more of that in the community. So I started I almost said the Black Pondo, the Bonsai Builders Podcast about 6 months ago, and I've tried to release an episode every week, and it comes out on Spotify and YouTube and wherever you listen to Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts. So yeah, the podcast, the kind of general premise of it is taking a really intentional look at, as a hobbyist, what's the path to getting to a professional level of skill, and knowing that we're going to have a lot less hours to accomplish that. How do we optimize that path, and how do we look at different people's goals and what's helped them achieve those goals, so that others who are going to then come and want to go down this same path have a blueprint or some kind of thoughts, and then also just to discuss hot topic issues and provide a place for people to connect to the different figures in the bonsai community. So that's kind of the premise of the podcast. And, that might change over time, but so far that's kind of been the overarching theme that I've tried to stick to with sourcing my guests and my questions.
That's fantastic. And yeah, like I said before, I legitimately look forward to every week. And I've listened to a few episodes like multiple times. Talking about travel, I always download a few episodes before I get on the plane. And I've really enjoyed it. And I really appreciate how frequently you're doing them, like once a week. I mean, doing podcasts, it's a bit of work, I would say. So I really appreciate the frequency that you've been able to achieve with all your guests. Great work, man. Seriously.
Yeah, that part is actually the podcasts have been fairly lightweight in terms of I like talking to people, so it's fun to have these conversations, and then the editing is pretty straightforward, which is nice. I keep it to just audio, not video, and the release process is pretty streamlined, which is nice. But I'd say keeping to that weekly schedule is tough. I definitely have to push myself sometimes when I don't want to schedule another episode or find another guest or create another outline. Do I have to adhere to that? No, I mean, there's no kind of monetary requirement or something like that. But I don't know. I guess I want to try to, at least for the next few months, try to keep to that, or hopefully this year, I guess, would be a good goal. Keep to that kind of schedule and then see what's sustainable going forward. But I think it does. The reason I'm doing it is because I think it really does weeks that I've missed episodes, I definitely have a marked decrease in viewers the following week, and I have to kind of rebuild from that peak. It's almost whenever you like get injured while you're working out, and you have
Yeah.
to like restart your kind of buildup of your bench press or whatever, right? And so keeping to that really strict schedule, I think, has helped the podcast grow more quickly. And I mean, I don't really have some goal around growth or something like that, but for me, it does provide some motivation to like see those numbers go up over time. So that's kind of why I've tried to stick to that weekly schedule.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think that's fantastic. I feel like I'm almost at the opposite end where like podcasting, I really enjoy it. It's it's important to me. I would like to do it for the long term actually. I'd like to do it for many years. However, I don't necessarily like I could not do it once a week. That would just be too much and too much of an overload for me. So more so it's kind of scheduled around the rest of my life. And I tend to find that like I'll dive in and do a bunch of episodes and then stop for a long time and then do a bunch and then stop. And that's just kind of how it goes for me. I think you have a much more intelligent approach, especially in terms of like getting more listeners. But I'm doing what I'm doing. But anyways, I love the podcast. You're doing a fantastic job, and please keep it up. I'm probably your number one fan out there.
Well, I'm your number one fan, so we can definitely trade back and forth there. Honestly, I listen to your podcast whenever a new episode comes out. A lot of times, I use listening to the podcast as my reward for like working out. So I'll only listen to podcasts while I'm running or at the gym. And then, if I want to pick up and finish the episode, then I have to go back to the gym. So that's been kind of a fun little way to
Nice.
but whenever you don't release an episode, then I don't go to the gym. So you
Oh
better
shoot.
remember that.
Shoot. Okay. I'll get
I'm just
I'll be
teasing.
better.
No, 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 no. I mean, I think it's to really it's about being able to do it for the long term, right? And so you've already released over almost 40 episodes or something like that, right? Maybe even more. So, you've been really, burning the midnight oil there and making a really long-lived podcast. And I think the guests that you get are always really high quality. So
Ah,
it's a joy to listen to.
well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. So, for anyone that might not know you, would you give us maybe a brief overview of like how you got into bonsai and what bonsai looks like for you these days?
Yeah, so I mean, I watched Karate Kid as a kid, and then whenever I, I think something captured me about the tree in the mountain that they collected, that Yamadori that they collected. That definitely like is a core memory stuck in my brain. And then yeah, I came out to California actually once, and we saw this guy when I grew up in Pennsylvania, and we came out to California on vacation, and I saw this stand on the side of the road selling bonsai, and that was my first experience, maybe when I was 13 or something like that, getting a little tree, and I killed it, but I kept the book, and I always would memorize the book and like be reading it in my room and looking up species and stuff like that, which was really fun. And then, after I graduated college, I moved out to the Bay Area and started volunteering at the bonsai garden at Lake Merritt and started actually having a static tree collection. And then maybe the last 3.5 years now, I've kind of rededicated myself to doing bonsai in terms of really setting goals of trying to like be able to create trees myself at a professional level. So I don't, I'm not like seeking to do it as a profession, but I want to be able to create an indistinguishable product from a professional would be my like ultimate goal.
Love it. Love it. So, I think earlier you described yourself as a hobbyist, and I feel like that's an I never know what to call myself or call someone like you. I think I usually say like a hardcore hobbyist or a hardcore enthusiast. And I don't know, like none of the words quite fit quite right. Do you usually say hobbyist?
I usually say hobbyist. I mean, I do sometimes do small amounts of paid work, but I wouldn't I'm like, my work is not at what I would deem a professional level or like a level high enough that I could do it full time. And I don't have a desire to like have my sole income source be bonsai. So, I wouldn't really say I'm of a professional. I, yeah, I would just call it like a hardcore hobbyist, right? Like somebody who is deeply dedicated to the pursuit of bonsai. And then I would say like the distinction between hobbyist and professional would be the kind of having to pursue it and from a monetary standpoint as well, right? Like having a monetary component be a big component of how you orient your practice, right?
Yeah,
But
for
there's
sure.
probably a lot of definitions for that, but that's how I think of it.
Totally. Completely on the same page there. I do think that I would love if there was a term, or maybe not even a term, but just like when I'm talking about bonsai, really, I want it to be my lifestyle, or I feel like it becomes a lifestyle rather than just a hobby, where like a hobby is something like you do every once in a while kind of thing. Whereas I feel like a hardcore hobbyist that just like
Mm.
lives the bonsai lifestyle. And I'm like obsessed with bonsai. And I feel like you are kind of the same way.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I see like you and Sam Tan, for example, as like the exemplars of people that I want to emulate, like in terms of what you've been able to accomplish so far in bonsai and the sacrifices you make in your personal life to adhere to this bonsai lifestyle that leads to these certain results. So I definitely understand that distinction. And like, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what the word for it is, but there definitely is a difference between someone who's making the commitments they need to in their life to pursue bonsai at a high level and someone who's has a few trees. And not that there's anything wrong with that, right? But like there's definitely a difference in someone who's actively seeking to optimize and like makes bonsai a core part of their life versus somebody who's doing bonsai conveniently.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, I was curious going back to your podcast. Is there anything that was maybe particularly impactful, or anything from like your recent guests on your podcast that maybe changed your perspective on something, or made you think differently, or kind of just like reinforced a belief that comes to mind?
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. I mean, I've had some, in my opinion, awesome guests recently. I
You
just
have.
had Peter T and Julian, who are both people I really look up to. So yeah, a lot of those things. Let me try to synthesize them a bit. First, talking about, I guess, in well, actually, let me go back one more episode too to Randy Bennett, who I thought had some cool thoughts. One thing that Randy said to me was, you need to not only study how to, if you want to like really build a niche in a tree species, you have to not only study, how that tree is built and like works from a bonsai perspective, but also study it from a like horticulture and scientific study standpoint. He was talking about kind of discovering the process for growing knees in cypresses and having that been drawn from unrelated to bonsai horticulture and like understanding the cypress more fundamentally. And I thought that was really cool because that's something that I seek to do with redwoods. And so there isn't really, because it's not a Japanese tree, so there's not really an established path and like a 100% verified meta for redwoods, right? There's not just one way to grow them. And so that's something that really stuck out to me and is something that I want to look further into because it's a species that's very iconic in California and like grows really well in my area and I enjoy a lot. And honestly was one of the inspirational species for me getting into bonsai. So that was pretty transformational for me. Um, and then, yeah, I mean, with Julian's episode, I thought his talk on, um, well, I love his like very philosophical approach. I just like those kind of conversations, so I enjoyed that a lot. I I thought his talk on wabi sabi was like, oh, and like how that's fundamental to the Japanese aesthetic and like the meaning of wabi sabi was very eye opening for me. I had not like I didn't know that or I didn't you know, I think that gave me another look into like one level deeper of, what underlies the Japanese aesthetic and how does that relate to Japanese culture. So that was really fun and interesting and like something I want to continue to kind of think on. And then, man, Peter's episode was awesome. I felt like that was one of the Peter on your podcast is one of my all-time favorite podcast episodes. I think you've done 2 episodes with him now, right? Or, but maybe I'm misremembering, but that maybe I've just listened to it so many times. But the episodes that you've done with him are some of my favorite because I feel like he comes with such a like well thought out but exceedingly humble um, explanations of his mindset and how it leads to the results that he gets. And but he has the backing of it of here's all these amazing trees and awards that he's won with this mindset. So I always enjoy hearing him, and I think there was multiple things, and maybe we can get into that, but multiple things within his episode that I thought were pretty that I related to a lot, which was cool.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, all three of those were really cool. And going back to your first comment regarding redwoods and other American native species in particular, I'm like so excited to see the different ways that we can approach those types of material, especially redwoods. Like I think you could do several different styles with a redwood and make them look very cool. And so I love that. I could listen to Julian just rant and get all philosophical all day. I love that guy. He's so awesome. And then Peter, like, man, such a wise individual. I feel like I've spent a ton of time around him because he's my bonsai teacher and I've worked with him since about 2008 now. But I always am learning new things. He's always just thinking about bonsai. I mean, that guy works harder than like I've ever met anyone else. He's like 7 days a week, every single week, working on bonsai all the time. And just it was really interesting. I think one of the things that I kind of tripped out about that he was saying was he was talking about that in the West, we are so technical. We want to break down every portion of a tree and define why the tree is good. But then he was talking about the Japanese aesthetic where maybe like they just don't look at it in that light, in that approach, and they just kind of look at the overall picture. I thought that was very interesting and just kind of like changed the way that my mind has been thinking about things. And then he was also talking about how some masterpiece trees, like he can't quite put his finger on why the tree is so special and what brings it to that next level. And it's not necessarily just because everything is technically perfect. And I don't know. I thought he made several very interesting points, and I really liked that episode. I'm glad you recorded it, and I want to listen to it again.
Yeah. I also another thing that he said that really stuck out to me and resonated with me was build appreciation for each step of the build process. Like have pride in the graphs that you I mean he didn't say it exactly these words, but have within the building analogy, right? Whenever you're creating the frame for the house, have pride and gain enjoyment from a really well-crafted frame, right? And I think from a craftsman perspective, like that's so true. Like you can think of that like the best Japanese bonsai pots, even the parts that aren't visible, have that excellence carried into them, right? And to me, or like for my pursuit, or like how I want to approach bonsai, being able to really cultivate that in myself to make sure that I do that level of detail and like I want to make sure that my brain really reacts positively to really nailing each of those individual steps. And so that really resonated a lot with me. And I thought was a really powerful statement. And I think having that attitude is what makes the best bonsai, or just in general, makes the best things. Right. And so I thought that was cool and like really, I hadn't heard it expressed in quite that way before. So that was really uh, awesome for me.
100%. Yeah. I think the term Kaizen really resonates with me. And I've heard several people talk about this in the past, but I think if you focus on something and just continuing to iterate on that one thing and just making it a tiny fraction of a percent better, little by little, eventually you achieve these massive results. And I think that's absolutely the right approach with bonsai in particular, and just having pride in every little area that you focus on. I think that's so important. I really like that point that Peter made as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think he did a really good job of bridging the gap between a lot of these Japanese concepts and how Japanese think of the aesthetic and the practice of bonsai, and making that a little bit more understandable from a US standpoint without using words like kaizen or shuhari or, you know, wabi sabi. Like, he made it very in direct English, made it very understandable, which I think was cool, and like really I'm really thankful for him for coming on the show and sharing that with everyone.
awesome. Yeah, I feel like part of why I love being Peter's student is his ability to break things down in a very simple and digestible format. And like I need that to learn bonsai, and he does just a very good job of that. So love it. Awesome. Well, changing gears here a little bit, I understand that you recently went to Japan, and I hope it's okay. I ask you a bit about this. I'm sure like you are going to talk about this on your podcast, but I was just curious if you could tell me a little bit about that experience and how it went for you, and maybe some highlights or what it was like for you.
Yeah, this was my 5th, I think, trip to Japan centered around bonsai, and well, I mean, every time I go to Japan, it's centered around bonsai, to be honest, but, 5th trip to Japan, and it was just a once in a lifetime experience. Like, it was head and shoulders above the previous trips that maybe not head and shoulders, maybe just head above the previous trips that I've done in terms of just enjoyment, and I think it was kind of a lot of things coming together. I I wouldn't say, like, I came out of it and my bonsai practice is transformed necessarily, but I had a lot of fun. Like, it was a really great experience and something that I will never forget. So, um, I think a lot of things kinda came together for that. One, like, I got to do part of the trip with, my my mother and my brother came and visited me. Unfortunately, my wife couldn't go on the trip, so they kind of, subbed in as the family, contingent, and I had a really great time sharing bonsai and, like, the trip in Japan with them. And then Kokufu 100 was amazing. The caliber of the trees was better than any of the other shows that I've been to. I feel like they kind of pulled out all the stops. And then I got to engage with the community in a new way through both starting to be able to speak a little bit of conversational Japanese finally after studying for a while. So being able to connect with these kind of Japanese artists who maybe don't speak English and, not have deep conversations, but start to have conversations and connect with them and kind of geek out about our shared passion. And then also, I did multiple interviews over there with English speaking folks, capturing their experience with the show. So all those things kind of combined. And then at the end of the trip, I did a road trip with a small group of kind of um, other enthusiasts or people like at our tier of hobby level, I guess. And so getting to geek out with them, like having the family, the show, and then the road trip, like those three components really kind of combined to make a magical experience for me.
Oh, that's so cool. That is awesome. Was there anything that maybe really stood out to you bonsai wise? Like, did you have some highlights bonsai wise? I mean, I'm sure seeing Kokufu 100 just is a massive highlight, but anything stand out in particular with Kokufu or within anything else bonsai related over there?
Yeah. Well, one thing that I thought was cool, and these aren't in any particular order, but one thing I thought was super cool, and I'm wondering if you relate to this, is I've been studying a lot with Ryan Neal and also with Adam Toth, and I went to both Kimura's garden as well as Taiga Urshibata's garden.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
I feel like seeing kind of going back in time and seeing the I don't know what the predecessors to these people's practices and seeing the things that I'm learning kind of borne out or even just where they came from, like the getting to see those things. I had a much deeper experience at those gardens than some of the other gardens that like were amazing in their own right, but I wasn't able to kind of trace some of the it was just different being able to see the techniques being borne out in different ways, and that was really cool. So going to Taiga's garden as well as Kimura's was fun, and then yeah, that was one of the coolest. That was one of the coolest things I think. And then I also this trip I try to like pick something that I'm going to try to study while I'm there. My last trip I did Shohin junipers and the creation process. This trip I focused on like what aesthetics in medium to large junipers do I like looking at pad shape and pad depth and like degree of complexity and all these different things and trying to study that. So that was what I tried to at every garden I was going to. I was like pigeonholing in on the junipers and trying to kind of learn something from that. And I wouldn't say I like had these crazy epiphanies, but it was still fun to do and kind of guided a lot of my sightseeing at the nurseries to hopefully help me take something away from it.
That's so cool. Did at Taiga's place, did you get to check out his new koi pond?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah? Was
The
is it
last
pretty
time I
cool?
visited, it is pretty cool. The last time I visited, the day before they filled it with water the day after I left. So I
Oh,
was happy to get to go back and see it kind of fully realized, which was cool.
that's so cool. Yeah, well, I guess does Kimura have a koi pond as well? I think
He does. I would
he
actually
does.
say Kimura's is a little bit Kimura's is cooler to me because well, Kimura has like I
Like
don't know, these
giant
koi are like
fish,
million
right?
dollar koi for fish, and there's like 10, 20 of them or something like that. So his got some that part like I don't know as much about the different varieties, so you know the fish are cool, but the pond is a little bit more like natural and integrated, whereas
Yeah,
Taiga's is definitely a little bit more it's newer, right? And so it's a little less kind of patinaed in, if I'd say, but still very
yeah.
beautiful and a nice feature.
Gotcha, gotcha. That makes total sense. And I think his fish are probably just younger and takes time to grow them. And yeah, I don't know why. So I have a koi pond, and it's close to my bonsai garden. If I could redo it and I had a lot of money, I would figure out a way to better integrate the two, the bonsai
Mm,
displayed with the fish. And I think last time I was telling you we were talking like I started my bonsai garden because I was up in the Sierra and I saw like trees, rock, and animals, and like basically there's streams and rivers up there, and there's trout. And I just thought that like the combination of everything was really beautiful together. And so I do think even though koi is not bonsai, it's almost like a subgenre that's somewhat related to the hobby, but not really.
yeah,
But
I don't know what it is, but a lot of people in the bonsai hobby also enjoy fish.
yeah,
So like saltwater or freshwater tanks or aquascaping or koi ponds. So there's definitely got to be something that's going on there in the underlying psyche that kind of connects those things.
for sure, for sure. Cool. Well, going to Japan and then seeing bonsai here in the United States, I was curious if after going to Japan, uh, you have any thoughts on maybe what might separate high-level Japanese bonsai from what we typically see in the US?
Hmm. Yeah, that's tough. Um, I think there are glimpses of similarity. I mean, one thing is just, and I talked about this with Peter. There's just a lot of age over there that you can't really fake, right? And so, if they have 1,000 trees at the 80 years old mark of cultivation, and we've got 50, you're just naturally going to get less masterpieces or of the highest quality trees out of that, right? So they've been practicing it longer and they have more material to use to create these trees, and so you're bound to get diamonds out of that. Um, yeah, and then I mean, I think that there the practitioners there, or there's more practitioners that are able to craft a tree at a high level than here, right? And so thus, if there's 100 people making trees there and there's 10 people making trees here, then, you're just going to get more trees there. But I don't think there's anything like, you know, I don't think some of the trees that you see at PBE, I don't think those would be out of place at Kokofu in any stretch of the imagination. So I think we're getting towards that. And we don't have the depth to call on, right? Those might be the 75 best trees in the US or whatever in the area at the time versus, um, you know, Kokofu's putting up 300 trees in the exhibit hall or whatever, right? So, and 2 weekends. But, yeah, I don't know. What separates high level Japanese trees from US trees? Yeah, maybe just the time aspect. And then I think that we're less skilled on average here as well, right? Like I would imagine the practitioners, there's more practitioners that can execute at a high level there than here.
Totally, totally. Makes sense. One thing I've been thinking about recently, and maybe from your last few podcasts, I got me thinking: is age the most important thing for high level bonsai, or most important aspect of high level bonsai? Is that like the number one thing above everything else? And
Mm,
I don't know the answer to that question. I guess when I'm talking about age, I mean both the physical long-term age of the tree, like how old is this tree actually, and then also the time, not necessarily the time in the pot, well, part of that, but like the mochi komi, or the feeling that the tree and the pot have together showing age. Are those a combination of the actual tree's age and then that mochi komi together? Is that the most important thing when it comes to high level bonsai? Do you have any thoughts on that?
yeah, yeah. I got some flack from some of my friends from the Peter episode for not
Okay.
diving a little bit deeper into that. So I'm happy to talk about that. I
Oh,
mean, it's probably very personal whether you value the I mean, I mean, from a Japanese perspective, and I'm not an expert on this, but it sounds like, from what Peter was saying, a lot of things are forgiven from the cultivated age of the tree, right? So that you know is cultivated age more valuable than the precision? And I mean, in Japanese shows, you see a lot of trees that look like clunkers to me, and they're there probably because of the provenance and the age, right? So I think the Japanese do have a lot more add a lot more value on that in their value system, and bonsai is from Japan, and so maybe that should carry over to the US. I don't know. For me personally, I get a lot of enjoyment out of the kind of intangibles that come about for a tree that's been a bonsai for a long time. Um, so I like that, but I don't know that there's a way to say objectively that is more valuable or less valuable than a good design, or a a question I have for you though is, Peter made this distinction about age of the tree being, I mean, these multiple different types of ages, but one type of age being the age of the tree. And um, I'll often see, I think one of the main kind of friction points I've seen between like the grafting versus not grafting school is like, whenever you take that Sierra juniper that's really old and you graft it, you you yes, open the door to create a primary branch that has like older characteristics as a bonsai branch, but you are deleting essentially the, 100 years, 150 years of growth in that primary that you cut off or whatever, right? To make room for that grafted branch. Or like to compress the design, right? So I'm curious how you think of that dichotomy between, sometimes to make a older aged bonsai in the Japanese sense, you are removing natural age of the tree.
yeah.
And I'm curious if you think of that dichotomy at all, or if that isn't
Yeah.
isn't a conflict, or what you think of that.
Yeah, I have some strong thoughts on that actually. So, okay, so if you graft a Yamadori trunk, which is mostly what's going on here in the United States, yeah, I absolutely take the age. I mean, the age of the branches is very important. Some of the trees that I've collected, they have an interplay of live and dead, which is like so awesome, right? That's what you want in branches, or they may have some twist in them or things like that. And I do think it would be like if you have a really badass old branch, I think it's an absolute sin to cut that off and do an approach graft onto the tree. However, you could scion graft at the ends, and then you're still keeping the age of the branch, and you can lower that and use that with the scion, the new foliage, if you scion graft near the edge, the ends. So I generally think if you have old branches, you should keep them and you should try and scion graft. That's the way to go. However, if you then it becomes a question like what's more important. So let's say maybe you have, maybe we should keep 50-year-old branches, obviously, or 100-year-old or several 100-year-old branches. We should absolutely keep those. If there's a branch, maybe it's 15 years old, it doesn't have that much interest. Well, I would say that I think that you can get an approach graft to thicken. You can grow it out, get it to thicken, and then use the foliage. And then you haven't lost that much time. I mean, basically, like in my lifetime, I will see a better final result with the grafted foliage compared to if I tried to keep the original foliage. So I think it's just a question of weighing what's going on with the tree. I do think you should not cut off just really old, ancient, awesome branches. However, I do think that certain times with junipers in particular, Yamadori junipers, to make a really nice compact design, which is often what I personally like, it's almost impossible to not graft them at some point. So you could, I think it would be really cool. One thing I would love to see us do is graft our native foliage onto trees. I haven't seen anyone actually do that. Like I've heard a lot of discussion about it and I think about it a lot, but I haven't actually seen anybody do it. I think that could be very cool. But I do think just to get that foliage closer to the trunk and make a more sustainable design, uh, scion grafting can be good. That's my thoughts.
Yeah, that makes sense. I that seems like a logical, take on if you want to preserve the primaries or even some of the secondaries, like you'll just have to scion graft, and then you still get that advantage of the foliage that you want to build the branches with. Though, like it is going to be potentially a less compact design if you scion graft than if you um, approach graft to the trunk or whatever, right, and create a new set of primaries.
Correct. That is very true. That is very true.
I think of Peter's the tree at the last PBE. I think it won the medium category. His you know what I'm talking about? His shimpaku that's
Yes,
grafted on. It's probably California or something like that.
was it displayed with a cork bark elm?
I think it was. Yeah, I think that was the one that was displayed with the cork bark.
Gotcha. I'm pretty
Like
sure that
that
was a
tree.
Rocky Mountain juniper. Yeah, little Rocky. It was like
Oh,
medium
really?
size.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty
Oh,
sure.
maybe I'm thinking of the wrong tree. Not the no, sorry, not the medium size. It would have been maybe in the large category then. I thought he had a tree that
Oh, yeah, yeah. The
it's
one that we,
California that's grafted and it's got the structure is basically like this one approach graft that comes down and
yes,
then builds this whole really compact, very very nice looking and refined tree. Like he built it from the inside out over a long time period. But the structure is pretty simple, right? It's literally like one approach that kind of comes down and curves down and then builds the whole tree from that, right? Um,
totally.
so that's a like for that tree, for example, maybe I mean, I think he did an excellent job of executing that tree. But there was probably a scenario in the beginning where he's like, "Oh, I could create this really wide tree and utilize some of these longer branches, or I can, graft in the interior." And I'm just that's something that I'm still kind of figuring out is like for Yamadori junipers, like when is it right to do that process versus utilize the secondaries and primaries and create a scions with maybe a little bit more interesting structure. And by interesting, I just mean like more origination points for branches from the trunk. But
Totally.
it would necessitate it being bigger, right? But yeah.
Yeah, I guess my thoughts on grafting Yamadori junipers is it's very case by case, and it's like you got to weigh the pros and cons for everything, every branch. But I think you make a good point in that we don't want to just wipe out the really old branches. We want to figure out a plan that works. Seems to me that a lot of Yamadori junipers, like I know that you can either compact them or create an elongated design. I feel like often there's like two trees with Yamadori. So sometimes there's one up
Mm.
top and sometimes there's one down below. You can make a really nice compact design on the one below. The top one could be either. I don't know where I'm going with this, but uh,
No, I think that's a good observation. I think that's a really good observation. I like that. I kind of gravitate towards the one down below, the compact one, but I want to get better at making the the larger tree as well sometimes. I mean, I think that can be especially compelling in the large tree category, right? Where it's like you can have like the sky's the limit in terms of space. Like if you're trying to make like the extra large tree category from a show perspective, right? Because it's like you really don't have an upper limit on size, and so you can utilize these really interesting features to make something unique, and you're not getting penalized against the other trees that have more power per space, right? So um, I think it might even change based on what size category tree from a judging perspective that you're trying to make. That could be a decision criteria too.
for sure. For sure.
But yeah, I think like age of the tree, I mean, to me is really compelling. Like I agree with Peter that like age as a bonsai is a compelling feature of a tree. And I get a lot of enjoyment from seeing that like successive growth and patina that builds on a tree as it is a bonsai over a long time period. So, I mean, I think you want to do both though. Like you want to make a really compelling design and then age it, right? So, um,
I
you
agree.
know, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I actually, one thing that I'm quite passionate about is growing trunks. And like, I'm not going to go out and just grow like really weird trunks with like jacked up Nabari and no taper. However, it would be interesting. Like what Peter got me thinking about is, hey, if I go out and I'm growing 50 different trunks, right? Like maybe some of those kind of weird ones, but for some reason I like it. Maybe I should keep a couple of those and grow them out long term and see what they become. And over time,
Mm,
it does seem like time forgives all those weird quirks and improves them to a
yeah.
degree.
Well, I mean, I think I tend to like weird trees, like unique trees. Um, so I kind of like the idea of choosing some kind of unique feature and building a design around that, even if it doesn't make the optimal, scale. I like that idea, like Walk Like an Egyptian, like by Dave DeGroot, that where you had this L-shaped branch at the top, and he carried that through the consistency of the design and made this really cool composition. Like to me, that's a very interesting way. Like that's a very stimulating design, um, and also captures that uniqueness or like that funkiness. Like I just like whenever I'm looking for material for my own garden, I I often look for that, or like I find myself gravitating towards something that's a little that's has that unique characteristic that sticks out to me.
That's awesome. I do like that tree also. And I feel like he made something really cool out of like a design flaw technically, but he did make a really cool, interesting, engaging design. Sweet. Very nice. Well, I don't know exactly. I think we were talking about your trip in Japan, and then we kind of went down a rabbit hole, which is great. Rabbit holes are very much encouraged. But one thing that I did have here in my notes is I'm pretty sure while Kokufu, or sometime around when Kokufu was going on this year, a famous potter, Gyozon, actually passed away. And I was extremely bummed about that, and he is actually probably one of he I would say he is my favorite bonsai potter, especially when it comes to unglazed containers. I just love and appreciate his work so much. Are you a fan of his containers yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I find his work to be the most appealing of the present day unglazed potters. So, uh, I guess strangely enough, I bought my first Gyozon pot the day that he passed away. I didn't know he had passed away.
Oh,
I
wow.
don't even know if it was news, but the first time I on this trip to Japan, I was like, okay, I want to spend a little bit more money on pots, and I bought my first pot, and it just happened to be the day that he passed away. So when I heard about that later in the week, I was really sad to hear about that because I think he was making amazing pots, and so it's really a loss for the community not to have that experience there that anymore. I didn't know him personally or anything like that. I did get to visit him actually. I went to Tokoname a few years ago and I just was there alone. I stopped off on the train on between going from Kyoto to Tokyo or the other way, I don't remember, but I I got into the town and I didn't have any appointments set up or anything like that. I was like, all right, well, I heard there's bonsai pots here, so I'm gonna try to see some stuff. And I went to this store, Isamura-san's bonsai warehouse or something like that. I can share the link with anybody who's interested for the location. But I went to the store and he spoke a little. This guy Isamura-san was like, "Oh, hey, you're American. Like, you're welcome to shop my pots here. Is there anything that like is a must see for you? And like, what's your dream here in Tokoname?" And I was like, "Well, I'd love to see Gyozon." And Isamura-san drove me in his car. Oh, he called Gyozon and was like, "Hey, can we come over? We've got this American here. He really wants to meet you." And so he drove me over there and I got to
Oh,
take some like videos with Gyozon, and he was just such a happy, like smiling dude. And
that's so
he
rad.
was in such good, like he was making top tier pots when I was there. Like he was really excited to show me his bonsai garden. So I was really surprised to hear that he has passed because, he just seemed like somebody who was, you know, in excellent health. And
Yeah.
so I was very surprised by that. But, and I'm sad that, we won't have that source of pots in the future. But hopefully people will kind of carry on that legacy and make pots in his style, like his son or like now and others.
Yeah. What was his space like? Can you describe it?
Yeah, I mean, he had you go into his house and, he has a very utilitarian. I mean, I can't 100% remember, but it might have even been like kind of like a packed dirt floor workshop, where he's got his kind of pottery and then these drying racks all around the room. So it's kind of like a house with like a workshop area. And then he's got like a showcase of his pots and then like a kind of wooden floor area that goes into like a fancy area. And then his house is just like, his bonsai collection is just like a normal backyard.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a curated, temple garden or something like that. It's just a dude's backyard who loves bonsai, and so it was pretty cool. But it was a very utilitarian space. But then he had these really nice display areas, and then yeah, I mean the 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 workshop area, like he's standing up on like a kind of a plinth or like a table where he's working on his trees. So it was very much like a Japanese craftsman workshop area. So it was cool to see, and my impression of it was that there was a lot of light and it was pretty tall ceilings too.
Gotcha. That's so cool that you were able to go see him in his element. I always appreciated that it seemed like he had two different styles of pots. I mean, he had many, many types of pots, but he had more traditional. This is like my stupid interpretation. He had his very traditional bonsai containers, and then he had almost like an experimental type containers. And it was just really interesting to see the two different types. And I thought he did a very good job in both. I tend to prefer his more traditional. And I just think that they are so high level, so well built. I love the clay color, the texture. They're built so sturdily. Like I feel like they will just last, go on forever and ever. But just such high quality containers. And then his experimental stuff was always very interesting and different, and it didn't necessarily fit inside any box or mold. But I thought it was cool that he did both.
Yeah, he gave me a little booklet when I was there that had his he had a display or like, I don't know, like a gallery essentially of where his new designs were all highlighted, and there was some funny stuff. He had pots with, the stand built into them, so you get a 2 for 1. That was pretty funny.
That's a trip. Yeah,
Yeah.
that is funny.
Yeah, and then he had
Interesting.
one where the accent plant was connected to the pot, so it was like you had a pot with a stand, and then there was like a bridge to a little accent area, so that was pretty funny. Yeah, I think a lot of his newer designs, even for like I mean, those were pretty creative, but even his more standard rectangular pot shapes, he started to add those kind of wavy bottoms to the bands, and then there were also like a little bit different clay color. But yeah, I also would say I gravitate more towards some of his traditional stuff. I mean, I even just like his production pots. Like it doesn't have to have this
Absolutely.
fancy leaf signatures and things like that. For me, like I love a lot of his just it has a magic to it, the clay, and the precision, but, like, having that tiny bit of variation even in the production stuff was really magical to me, so I picked
Yeah,
up some pots when I was over there, to have in my I mean, I actually I put a tree in one already, so that was good to have.
sweet. Yeah, well, Gyozon, I was really sad to hear about his passing, and he was an incredible bonsai container maker. And I think the beautiful thing about bonsai containers is that they can last forever, or a very, very, very long time, far longer than you or I, which is really cool. I mean, I think that his legacy will last a long time. Curious if his pots will go up in value now that there's not an ability to get more, at least new ones. But just big fan of his work, and I thought it was worth chatting about briefly.
Yeah. They probably will go up in value. I mean, I even whenever I was over there, they were already and I was like, "Oh, do you have any Gyozon pots?" And they'd be like, "Oh, you heard he passed away, like, the price will be a little higher." And so they're already having some of that. I mean, I've seen some posted on Facebook Marketplace that are asking for like 3 or 4 times the price, and I'm
Oh,
like, "I don't know if
geez.
it's gone up that much," but, um, yeah, I think they're very usable containers, and they'll be just like Suizon, kind of very, very popular into the future. But or Shuzon or Suizon, I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce that name, but another kind of recent Japanese potter that made similar kind of unglazed containers. And, I don't I think Gyozon will probably hover in that same kind of price point for the
Yeah,
Suizon or Shuzon pots.
that makes sense. That makes sense. Cool, cool. Well, I wanted to talk with you a little bit more about your relationship with bonsai and your podcasts. I guess I was curious if there are any aspects of bonsai that really kind of fire you up right now, or has anything been top of mind bonsai related? Have you been daydreaming about anything bonsai related lately?
Too many things, Jeremiah, too many things.
That's good.
I think there's, oof. I mean, for me, I mean, there's a few different categories, so I'll maybe outline them, and then we can talk about them or not talk about them as they spark your interest or don't. But one is I wanna keep the momentum of I feel like for the last few years, I've had a really good momentum of putting in hours of actually doing bonsai and improving at creating bonsai. So I feel myself incrementally improving. So I'm trying to find ways to keep that momentum going. Um, and then like a very kind of tactical thing that I've really been pigeonholing a lot into is trying to get like professional polish in juniper work, um, especially shimpaku. So I've been going to Adam Toth's house like multiple times a month and just working on random shimpaku there, or not random, but like the shimpaku that he thinks are good teaching moments, and trying to really really start learning how to clean properly, not only the tree, but like within a pad, right? Like the distributing the positive and negative space evenly within a pad as you're doing the cleaning process. Um, and then pad shape, um, pad depth to, if I set up the pad like within the pad structure this way now, what does that look like 3 years from now? Like, does that give me the desired end state product? Um, those kind of things I've been pigeonholing a lot into around Shimpaku. And finally, I'm starting to see and like understand a little bit more of how I accomplish that level of professional polish. And then I've been really having like popping up a lot of ideas around horticulture and water. That's been like a very like the science side of it. There's a lot of topics I want to explore there. Oh, and there's one final one. I got inspired while I was in Japan to try to create an app that you can use to ID bonsai chops. So I've been working on that. I mean, like semi bonsai related, I guess, but more like a cross between my kind of work that I do on the tech side and bonsai, where I'm trying to create a engine essentially that you whip out your phone or you upload a photo of a chop to a website, and then it gives you, oh, this is Gyozon. It spits that out. So those are the four kind of areas that I don't have enough time, but those are the four areas I've been really passionate about lately.
Very nice. Very nice. I heard someone mention that you can use most of the LLM apps to do the chop identification. Have you tried it, or have you experimented with that at all? And did it work okay for you?
Yeah. So I haven't had. I've been testing different photos I take via. I've been looking at multiple different backend engines to actually do the identification process, and I think what I'm finding is that I'm getting the best results with an ensemble of approaches. So having a few different ways to do that. One of those pieces, one of those building blocks, is um, using LLMs to like one shot translate a bonsai pot chop, right? But I haven't found it ultra good. For some, it definitely does do it, but I'm not like some of them are very stylized, and some of them aren't even in Japanese, right? So uh, you might have Chinese ones or European potters or American potters, right? So there's a really big variety of speakers, but definitely just asking an LLM, "Can you read this?" is one of the pieces of the engine. Um,
Nice.
for example, but another way you can use an LLM, which I'm exploring, is after you've narrowed it down to, "Hey, my model thinks it's one of these three makers." I take the image from my backend database that represents that maker, and I compare it, and I ask the LLM to compare it to the um, the chop that the user submitted, right? So I just have it look at it like a human would and say, "Hey, is this the same stamp?" And that actually works really well. So, but the magic is you need to get those 3 or 5 most likely ones to the
Ah,
LLM so it can compare.
got it. Got it. Cool. Well, shoot. If you develop the app, I would happily buy or use that. Most definitely. That would be great.
Well, I would love to just have it be free. You can go. It's on bonsaichop.id is the website. So right now it's in a data collection phase. So I'm asking people to submit photos
Oh, dang.
that I can use to train my model.
Okay, I didn't
And
realize you were
then
actually doing
yeah,
that's fantastic.
yeah, and then yeah, I mean, if it doesn't cost me anything, I don't want to charge anybody. It depends on like if it becomes really really used and it's costing me like $500 a month to you know s- host it, then
Uh-huh.
I would have to ask for donations or something like that, right? But um, we'll see if I can even make it work. I want to get like some standard of accuracy, like 80% of the time it's against my test data set, it's working well. Maybe then I would release it and see if that gets any traction.
Sweet. Very nice. I love it. One more time, what's that website?
Oh, bonsaichop.id. I thought that
.id.
was
Okay.
a fun name.
I love
Yeah,
it.
it's an Indonesian name, but it's like, bonsaichop.id. So
Perfect.
it kind of makes sense, I think. But yeah.
That works. I love it. Awesome. And then going back to your regarding juniper pad development and working on junipers in general, one thing I was wondering is when you're working with Adam or Ryan Neal, how have you found to get better? Or I don't know how to phrase this question appropriately, but how do you work on trees and then get feedback from Adam or Ryan so that it's most effective for you to improve in the future? Like, what's the best way for them to give you feedback, and at what point in the process? Or, and I imagine they both probably give you feedback differently, uh,
Yeah, for sure.
quite differently, I would guess. Like, what do you like? How do you like to get feedback? How do you like to work on a tree and get feedback?
Yeah. So, well, I kind of like to try to something that works well for me is having them set the initial pad, and then I come in and try to replicate that, and then they come back and correct like the second pad, and then I take those corrections and try to apply that to the rest of the tree. So that kind of process has worked pretty well for me. I think the other thing is you need your teacher to give you trees that challenge you, right? Um, so sometimes the teacher has to go out on a limb a little bit and give you something that it's like, hey, you can't mess this up. Like this is a client tree, or this is something where this is thousands of dollars or whatever. There's this might be a little bit outside your comfort zone, but you know You're gonna work on it, and then I'm gonna correct it, and we'll make sure that it ends in a good state. So, and I think like you have to demonstrate that you have the basic skill level to not, harm the tree even if you make a mistake. But yeah, that process in general is what's worked best for me. I think the other thing I struggle with is like sometimes you go to classes and it's very easy to fall into the trap of, hey, you like when a teacher's running a class with multiple students, like the easiest thing to do is say, "Hey, like here's the next step that you need to do, like you go execute it," right? But for me, that doesn't translate really well to my own um my own collection. Like I'm able to execute that really well, but then when I go to do it on my own tree, like I'm not making the same decisions because I wasn't making those decisions when I was learning it, right? And so I've tried to be really I've tried to push Ryan and Adam a lot to like let me make a mistake or let me own parts of the process. And that's been some of my best learning experiences is when I mess up and then I get the feedback like, hey, you can't mess up like this. Like it's not like it doesn't feel great in the moment, right? But those are the things that stick with me and help me develop. So that's what I've trying to push my teachers to give me more of those moments. I mean, like hopefully I do it right, right? But um, if I do it right 100% of the time, then I'm not learning anything, right? I already know that, right? And so I think you need to have those uncomfortable moments, or at least in my learning process, I like having those uncomfortable moments that stick with me and drive changes, like stick with me enough to drive changes in how I do things because the way I was doing it wasn't right. And so I need to have something to correct me.
100%. I like that. Yeah, I feel like I think it's really good to challenge yourself with trying to work on an entire tree, or at least like, let's say, a portion of a tree. Like, hey, I'm gonna do these 3 pads myself, 100%, and then get feedback from my teacher and say, like, wire them, adjust them, cut them back, clean them up, and then have him come in and look at him and say, like, well, this angle's a little off on this pad. You should have removed this part of the foliage, blah blah blah. I think that's like such a good way to learn, or just to do an entire tree, do everything start to finish, and then talk about it with your teacher. I think that is a very valuable way to learn as well. And getting the negative feedback it sticks a lot. I feel like because it's not
Yeah,
so
I'm
easy
curious. So,
to take.
I mean, if you're with Peter, oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I can
Oh,
hear
I
you.
can't
Can you
hear
hear
you for
me?
some
Okay.
reason.
Oh, oh. Check, 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 check,
Sorry, I think I
check.
unplugged my headset. One second.
Check, 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 check.
Okay, now I can hear you. Sorry about that.
No worries. No worries.
Hopefully, my headset isn't near dead. So I'm curious. When you're with Peter, like, are you mostly working on your own trees, or are you working on his trees whenever you're taking classes?
So I'm almost always working on my trees.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, and like I did the intensive series with Boone, and in that scenario, I was working on Boone's trees, like almost 100%. And then with Peter, it's mostly been working on my own trees. I've worked some on some of his trees before. And I would say at some point in the future, I would love to go to Peter's house, work on many of his trees, let's say like junipers, for example, try and wire them out start to finish, and then have him critique my work. I think that would be very, very valuable for me. But mostly it's working on my own trees. And I will say, I think you are a much better student of the technical side and just getting better at being a bonsai practitioner. Whereas I feel like my goals are mostly around like the quality of my trees overall. And I haven't focused so much on just getting really, really good myself. However, I would like to improve my skills. It's not something that I'm not focusing on by any means. But I think you are more hardcore and doing a better job at learning very quickly than I am.
Well, no, I would say, well, from my perspective, like, you have much more demonstrated results than I do. So, I don't know if I'd agree with that, but I, the before we touch on that, I just wanted to mention one thing about, I think there's certain scopes of work, and this is something I've struggled a little bit with because I work on other people's trees at their gardens a lot. There's certain scopes of work that really nobody's going to let you do on their tree, you know? So at some point, I think like one thing I might want to start bringing up trees to Ryan's place, for example, to do like structural setting on a Ryamadori. Like, there's some things where you have to get it right the first time, right? And you can't really make those mistakes on multi-thousand-dollar trees that aren't your own. So I think that's something that I need to change a little bit in my next classes, is maybe bring up some, like, if that's the scope of work that I want to do, bring up some of my own trees to practice on, just because, then the onus is all on me, right? And that's something that I'll need to make as a change. So I think your point of like you bringing your own trees to Peter, like, you know, you're the, like, Peter's there to help and guide you, but ultimately it's your tree. And so, he's, you're able to do the scopes of work and get the practice in that you want on, like, it's 100% relevant because it both helps you get better and also drives your goal of having the best collection, right?
For sure. For sure.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
you had this question in the doc, and
Uh huh.
kind of just made that mention of like focus on technical skill versus focus on like the outcome of having a good collection. And I think that's an interesting topic to delve into a little bit more. Could you kind of elaborate a little bit more on like what I've said that kind of gives you that representation, or how you think that differs from your approach?
Oh, yeah, most definitely. Yeah, and I I mean, basically, I think it's pretty simple actually. I think my main goals with bonsai have always been around the trees. So I want really high level trees. Like I want like I think I mentioned to you before, top 7 of the species in the United States for all of my personal collection. Uh and so I think that's a really hard goal for me to eventually achieve. And therefore my goals are always around the trees themselves. Secondarily, I'm focusing on my own personal technical skills. However, part of me has just kind of given into the idea that, okay, I'm never going to be Peter T in terms of from a technical perspective or ability because I just don't have the hours. I'll never be able to put in the hours that Peter has. So personally, I am very focused on the trees. Like my goals are all centered around my trees. I want to grow some incredible trees. I want to collect some incredible trees, and I want to make sure that my main collection gets to that point. Um, and I could do that by any means necessary. So I do think that progressing my technical skills absolutely does help me to get to that endpoint. But I'm also okay working with Peter, and I love working with Peter. Whereas I feel like you are very interested in the technical aspects of improving, and I like that. I think that's fantastic, and I need to be better in that area. But I think that is one difference maybe between like your goals and my goals,
Mm,
and not that either of them are more right than the other or anything like that. It's just an observation maybe that I made that I found is interesting. Would you agree?
yeah, yeah. I do agree that we have like somewhat of a different goal or approach, which is very interesting. Until you mentioned that, well, my first thought was like, oh, am I missing the forest for the trees? Like, is my goal actually to have, you know, top 7 trees, and I'm hamstringing myself by like the best way to do that would be to, you know, work. I can still work on them, but have some of the offload some of the decision making or polish steps to a professional, right? To make get that tree to the highest level it can be, right? I it's that's a tough one. I mean, I think a lot of my motivation traditionally has been I want, and maybe this is just like a hang up that's holding me back, but a lot of my motivation traditionally has been this is something that I'm doing for me, that I want to hone myself, like use as a whetstone to like change things about myself, like to be able to be more detail oriented, and to be like just prove to myself that I can like stick with something and be disciplined enough to reach a level of execution that kind of puts me in the top percentages of people executing at this thing, right? So yeah, so, I mean, I guess the hang up portion of it has been like, "Oh, I want when I put a tree into the show in my personal collection, like, from my personal collection, I want it to be 100% my work." And so I've had a little bit of a, like, intentional, like, I don't bring my trees to professionals to work on, because then essentially it's not my work 100%, right? And that's pretty arbitrary, but, like, I I see I don't think I have a very like, a lot of innate talent actually for making good-looking bonsai. I look at somebody like Matthew Glossio or, Sam Tan, who are able to kind of be taught something once, or, like, innately or whatever, right? Can make these, like, professional level polish looking trees, very quickly. And that same thing that they maybe learned in one session, it might take me like 4 sessions. Like I've had really embarrassing things where I go over to Adam's house and I practice this specific like juniper pad cleanup, and then I go back the next week and I still mess up the same thing, And so I still see myself progressing, which is like the kind of the light in the end of the tunnel, and that's like what keeps me going and like what I'm excited about and like why I want to keep pursuing it. So I think I can get there, but that like I want to be able to have my designs look like have those intangibles of a professional level of polish, and I guess that's why traditionally I've had less focus on the tree itself and more focus on my ability to execute it. So hopefully that kind of makes sense. And again, I don't think there's like a better or worse way to do this. I'm just like that's for me my personal goal, right? So I don't know. Hopefully that didn't come across any sort of way, but I don't know. That's just like trying to examine myself a little bit. I think that's where a lot of that has come from. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, first off, I highly respect your goals and where your head's at with trying to accomplish them. And I think that trying to become a better bonsai practitioner, a tacticianer, whatever you want to call it, I think that's a great goal. And I feel like you should want to be the best version of yourself and compare you to yourself. Don't worry about what other people are doing so much. Um, I do feel like it's a good idea for people to be extremely clear on what their goals are. And so I think that's maybe why I'm making a distinction here
Mm,
because my goals, and I don't know if these are good goals, like they really could not be a good goals. Like basically I'm saying I want to be a really good bonsai collector, which is weird. Like, especially if you sub that out with comic books or baseball cards or sports cars or something like that. Like it seems like it doesn't take like skill or talent to be a good collector, but like that's what my goals are. I feel like in bonsai it's a little bit different. There's just so many different aspects that go into that. And to be a really high level collector, there are things that you need to be good at. And so for me, I'm just making a big distinction in that I'm not trying to be the best from a technical perspective. And that's why my relationship with Peter T works so well. I'm going to leave that up to him. I'm going to learn. I want to get good at bonsai. I want to do a really good job, but like, I think it's really good to just think about your goals and organize them in like what's most important to least important. Like, be very, very specific. It's easy to be like very broad and general about goals. It's really hard to like define them and be really honest with yourself. So I think both of us should continue to work on that, and we both are. And so I think you're doing a great job. I think I highly respect your goals, and I think they're awesome. So good job.
thank you, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's whenever we had our first conversation, I learned a lot from your mindset, and it helped, and it helped me notice things in my own practice that were deficient. Um, Not that I have to change my goals to be the same as your goals, but there's things that I learned from your mindset around having a top 7 tree and like the how important the material acquisition um, stage of like the collecting stage of trees is just as important as the actual work as well, right? So uh, those are things like I appreciate people who have a lot of intentionality in reaching their goals, and I feel like you absolutely have that. And you know, I don't think one goal is better than the other. I think to me the interesting thing is how are you optimizing and what's the intentionality behind accomplishing that goal, right? And so, like in my podcast, I guess I talk a lot about topics that align with my intentionality or like my goal, and but I think I like to ask people about their goals too, because everything is in the context of their goals, right? And so people can kind of self-select into, oh, like this thing works for this person because this is what they're trying to do, and I love that aspect of it. So yeah, I do honestly worry about though, like I have this energy and passion and time to develop at Bonsai now, and I feel myself incrementally improving at like that technical level of polish. But I worry about, am I going to hit this point where my technical skills or my ability to progress starts to slow down? Like, am I going to hit some wall with age or just like amount of energy I have to devote to things as time goes on, and like never be able to reach that professional level or tier or polish? And then, that is something that I worry about though. But I right now I just want to give it my 100%, and like, hopefully I'll land high enough to be able to get trees in PBE at the very least. That would be, I guess, one of my barometers for success or not. But yeah, that is something that I think about, is like, hey, I gotta really take advantage of all the time that I can learn now, because I might not have that same motivation or ability or whatever in the future. So
I think you will. You will have that ability and drive. Just keep at it. Are you going to submit anything for next PBE?
yeah, I've been thinking about it. I have this struggle of like, do I have a tree or two that could get in? Probably. Would it be better if I waited? Would that tree show better at the next PBE and be
Yeah.
like, I'd be more proud of showing it? Yes. But like at some point, you got to make the decision of like, you got to pull the trigger. Like it would always be better 2 years from now or whatever, potentially. Right. So I have that struggle a little bit, but maybe I'll submit some things this year without the expectation of them getting in. But then I, I feel really strongly about like, if I really need to have some stuff in the show in 2029 for sure. That's like my hard and fast goal, to have
Nice.
at least to have one tree in the show in 2029. But I might submit some stuff this year. But it's just like I've only been getting like I really didn't start buying like PBE quality material until 3 years ago, and so it's like it's hard
Uh,
to build a tree in 3 years, right?
yeah.
So it
Yeah.
just hasn't had enough time under tutelage. Or the stuff that I've had for 5, 6 years is like a $45 juniper whip from Home Depot or whatever. So it's like not quite PB quality, or won't differentiate itself no matter how much you dress it up, right? So, that's kind of where I'm at right now in my personal collection.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. I feel like everyone struggles with that. Like, should we put it in now or wait a little bit? It'll be better. That is tough. And I guess I feel like I've come to the realization that it's just a snapshot, a window of a window in time. And, you put it in now, and then several years down the road, you can put it in again and again and again, and the tree will evolve and improve. And it's interesting to see. And so, I don't know, but I get it. Like, especially if it's a prize contender, maybe you wait. Maybe if it's not, then I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm wondering how you think of that. Like hearing you say that, it almost makes me think maybe you should always submit it, and then if it's good enough to get through the jury process, then, it improves the overall quality of the show, and you should maybe or like maybe I should take my ego out of it, of like wanting to show up the best as possible. Maybe it'll change after I get my first tree in too. Like, I feel like I want my first tree to really represent me to my best ability, right? And so, you know, that maybe there is a little bit of ego in that initial tree submission. And maybe I'll be more free to add stuff in once I've kind of set my, I don't know, debut or whatever you want to call
Nice. Looking forward to that debut.
it.
Excuse me. Cool. Well, you know, I really wanted to talk to you. I feel like you have a very scientific mind, and I was really impressed that you talked about the soil study that you did. I feel like bonsai is so interesting because we learn things so much from a anecdotal experience as opposed to scientific study. Maybe would you start by talking a little bit about the soil study that you did? I thought that was really cool, and I would love for you to break it down for us.
Oh, break it down. I like the pun there. Break down the soil. Okay, so I, I studied chemical engineering in school, and so I've always been interested in science and the process of science, and I like the idea of I've always really enjoyed reading about other people like growing seeds in different mediums and then measuring the height of the seeds after X months or whatever, and just having some like empirical evidence to back up viewpoints, right? And having reproducible experiments. I think that's a good way to learn over time and help people progress. So, and create reproducible results, right? I, but whenever I came to bonsai, I felt like, I never studied agricultural or like biology related stuff really. Like heat exchangers aren't really, and mass flow aren't really what I studied in school, aren't really relevant to bonsai directly. So I wanted to like read some of the foundational textbooks and scientific articles around horticulture to my hope is that it will help me grow better trees over time, right? And I just like to understand things. Or like seek a model to understand things that allows me to generalize some of my findings, right? And like just make a like when as I'm making a decision, I have some reason behind why it is it right or is it wrong? I don't know. Maybe my model that I've built up isn't good enough, right? But that will be informed and refined over time. So I like that idea. So yeah, I looked into both water and soil and I wrote a series of articles. This was one of my first attempts to kind of similar to the podcast, like find where my place is in the community, like how I can connect with folks and add value. Um, and my blogs didn't end up being super popular, but I had a lot of fun adding something where I did a bunch of research and cited it really rigorously and then showed it to folks. So I wrote a few articles on soil and a few articles on water. And yeah, the soil study that you're kind of talking about, I was just curious, and other people have done this too, so this wasn't anything groundbreaking, but I just wanted to see like, hey, if I set up an experiment like I would have in a lab in college with some of the equipment I have, um, how of the soils we use, like akadama, pumice, lava, and I guess organic material like potting soil, how much water do they hold? How quickly do they lose? How moisture retentive are they, and how quickly do they lose water? Um, like how much water do they hold? Sorry, and then how quickly do they lose that water over time? So, uh, we hear about akadama is the moisture retentive component, but we don't often have like, is that right or not? Who knows, right? So I wanted to test that, and I want to see people do more of challenging some of our assumptions and seeing whether they're correct or not. So
Awesome. And so tell us about how you actually tested these things and what were the
yeah.
results?
Yes. So, sorry, that was a long diatribe to not get to the point. But yeah. So essentially, what I did was I did a few things. One, um, I just put soil in a draining like container in a plastic cup, and I packed it so that it would simulate the kind of void space volume and simulate the situation that you have in a pot. And then I created cups of uh, all of these mixtures with holes in the bottom. And one was like akadama, one was pumice, one was lava, one was organic material. And I weighed them dry. And then I soaked them all and let them drain. And then I measured the weight of the container with the kind of soaked medium um, directly after as well. So, and then every 15 minutes for a few hours, I just weighed them again and saw how quickly they lost water. So, I think my study, the results were actually fairly straightforward or like matched with what I would expect, right? So, I tried two different types of akadama. One was a small particle and one was a large particle. The small particle held more water and dried a little bit more slowly. The large particle, has more airspace and less soil space, so it held a little bit less water and dried a little bit more quickly. But akadama was like probably 50% or more held more water than the other components than lava and pumice. And then in my results, actually, lava held more water than pumice, which I thought was interesting, and was contrary to studies that I've seen previously.
Oh,
So I would love for somebody to reproduce that and see maybe my pumice is a little different than the pumice that other people were using, right? I mean, there's obviously regional variations in these rocks, right? So there will be some amount of variability, but uh, yeah, pumice lost water really quickly, so it dried out very quickly. And then lava also dried out pretty quickly relative to Akadama. But yeah, that was kind of the results from those main components. And then my organic matter actually didn't drain really well at all. So that might have been like an experiment design issue, but um, or maybe it's a component of organic matter. But yeah, that I would maybe discard that part of the results. But the other stuff was pretty. I felt like pretty reproducible.
nice. I feel like that just kind of confirms what I thought. Akadama does hold a lot of water, especially compared to pumice and lava. If I remember correctly, I think that lava it didn't hold that much more water compared to pumice, right? Like the difference between Akadama to lava was much more significant than lava to pumice.
Yep.
Um, which I always wondered about, like I didn't know, and so your study helped me out there. One thing that I follow Peter T often, he just says use pumice or lava or a mixture of both, and I think that kind of confirms what Peter said because there is a difference in water holding capacity, but it's pretty close. So maybe it's not all that important. I
Oh,
mean,
interesting. It's interesting to hear that and kind of yeah, and then connect it to these kind of empirical results. Like connect the anecdote to like, oh, maybe this is why. I
yeah,
hadn't heard that before. So
yeah. I mostly use pumice, like pumice and akadama in my mixes, but this year actually I used some lava, and so and so far, I mean, my trees are growing great. I did hear there was like definitely drama going on. There were some hot takes going on regarding lava. Like people hated lava for a while. I wonder if that is still going on, or I don't know if it was like bad batches of lava or what the deal was exactly. But people were saying that
yeah,
there's
I think
poison in
Michael
the lava.
Hagedorn and yeah, Andrew Robson had a pretty spicy set of comments that they had put out there about like, hey, lava isn't good. I mean, when I was over in Japan, there were some growers that were 100% lava. Adam Toth uses a lot of lava, so I mean, yeah, there could have been bad batches or something like that, but I think, it is a fairly similar volcanic medium to pumice, for example, and even Akadama. So
Yeah, I wonder
it's probably not
it.
terrible.
Yeah, it'd be really interesting to test that lava that they had, and then test other lava just for I don't know something bad in there. What would it be? Bacteria or
Well, I think they were, I mean, it wouldn't, it's a pretty inorganic mix. So there's not really a lot of, I doubt there's a huge bacterial load in there. I imagine it could have been something like, I think they were talking about maybe there was a high amount of boron or something like that. So some sort of like
mm,
toxic chemical that was from the place that it was mined. So I don't know. I don't know. I actually don't even know the effects of boron, for example, on plants or like
yeah,
what concentrations are dangerous. So it's hard for me to say. But I think that's what I had heard was there was some boron scare or something like that. But I don't know
gotcha.
how that would be kind of hard to test. Like I don't know. There's not like a lot of there's not like a boron meter that the hobbyists would have or something like that. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, speaking of hard to test, in your mind, what makes it so challenging to run tests, efficient and effective tests for bonsai?
I don't think it's as hard as we make it out to be. Uh, to some extent, right? Like we well, one thing that's challenging is scale, right? How many Sierra junipers do you have in your collection, right? It's like you probably have a lot and it's probably less than 15, right? So, to get statistically significant results, there have to be some controls in place, right? And you have to have some amount of scalability of the the test, right? And so, if you're trying to feed two different trees differently, and see the results, well, I'm probably not going to base my life on, oh, I tested 2 trees and one grew more and one grew less. Like it could have been anything, right? Like
Yeah.
there could have been different, all sorts of differences, right, in the treatment of those plants that could have led to that, right? And so whenever people do agricultural studies, they're testing like acres and acres of fields against other acres of fields, and they're doing that across the whole county and stuff like that. So, the scale of tests is difficult in bonsai, right? It's hard to have, a meaningful amount of the same thing to test with, right? But I think we can do kind of pseudo scientific experiments where we still do try to measure and track things and keep them as similar as possible and to compare results, right? So that's one challenge. I think the other challenge is like trees are very complex systems and it's hard to see what's going on inside them, right? So uh, it's not super easy to test like how does the composition of like inside the tree change due to external factors that I've added, right? I think Ryan's tried to do that to some extent with the apical tests, and I think that's an interesting. I don't know a ton about those, but like burning up the leaves and then measuring the composition of the leaves is an interesting way to. I mean, seems valid to me to measure the composition in the tree. But again, there's a scale problem where it's like, you know, these, even if you have 2 Sierra junipers, they can have such different genetics and like histories growing from, one could have been picked up in 1,000 miles from another and could have totally different kind of source conditions that it was grown in that could lead to different results down the line in the composition. So that part is difficult to do at scale to get these, I don't know, like accurate or reliable or reproducible tests, right? The
Yeah.
main thing about science is it has to be reproducible. Otherwise, there's no value in it. So that's the biggest challenge, I think.
Got it. Yeah, it seems like to me, I mean, pretty straightforward. You could test a lot of things. It's just all about time and effort. Like you just have to put in a lot of time and effort, which is something that I do care about, but I would really like to know. I have a lot of questions in my mind when it comes to bonsai, but is it worth getting the actual answers? I don't know because it seems like a whole lot of time and effort to test these things. Are there any things that you would like to test that you think you are probably will in the near future? I saw some stuff on Bonsai Nut regarding water.
Yeah, yeah. So something that's really fascinating me right now is like, what is good and bad water? Because we hear that a lot. Like I've heard you say, like, oh, I have to do an RO system because my water's bad. Well, okay, how is if I see that my water has, 80 parts per million calcium versus 10 parts per million calcium, like how do I tell which one's good and which one's bad, right? So, um, like I believe people who say that, and I want to try to look a little bit more empirically at like one thing we can do, or what I'm doing right now. I'm actually planning a podcast episode on this, so I'm
Sweet.
thinking with one of my friends on looking into these questions. But essentially, what the tests that I have planned right now are step one, we collected a bunch of water reports from people in both quotes unquote good and bad regions, and um, we're trying to just pull out the key parameters of the water from each of those municipalities and say like, oh, okay, the good areas had an average of 80 TDS and the bad areas had an average of 320 TDS, right? And that comes to some extent still helps us start looking at what is a meaningful concentration of these ions in my tap water that might be good or bad and might trigger me to take some sort of remediation step, right? So that's the first thing, is just like mining data from existing reports and kind of doing a little bit of analysis to see what it tells us. The second thing I want to do is the big question that this like looking at tap water so seriously, the big question that it brings up for me is like, how much does the tap water actually even influence the soil plus water solution, right? Which is what in my model or my mind impacts the nutrient uptake in the tree. So I'm doing an experiment where I'm testing my water with a pH meter and an alkalinity tester and TDS meter before I put it into the pot, and then I'm soaking the pot, and then I'm um, catching the water as it comes out of the drainage hole, and then comparing those parameters, right?
Huh.
So that might
Yeah.
tell me like, does the soil actually impact the pH and the TDS and things like that, or um, does the water overpower? And then if the water overpowers the soil medium, then that would tell me that maybe looking at my tap water is more important as opposed to less important, right? So I want to look at that. That's like an actual like physical test I want to do. And then I think it'd be interesting to look at it over time too, to see like, does my soil like get broken down or spent over time? Does the tree interact with the well, I mean, the tree does, and the bacteria in the soil do interact with the soil chemistry to, impact the soil water solution. So that's something I want to look at. And then the third component of it is I want to look at fertilizers and break down. Like my hypothesis is that fertilizer um, is effective, and it it says on the package exactly what concentrations you're using, right? So down to the gram, you can tell, okay, whoever formulated this fertilizer mix thinks that, you know, 2 milligrams per 2 weeks of calcium is meaningful. And so I want to just break that down a little bit more explicitly and then compare it to what's in our water so that we can make a decision of like, hey, is any of this stuff in our water any meaningful amount? Like, which of these components is it really important that we need to make sure that we're supplementing? So those are the three kind of studies that I'm working on right now for a future podcast episode. And there's all sorts of other stuff I want to test, but I'm trying to keep myself locked down to just that for now.
Yeah. Very nice. Well, I definitely think that water quality is something that I'm very interested in. I really look forward to hearing the results that you find out. I do feel like there's just so many variables within bonsai. Like when you, just for example, looking at when you test the water that comes out of the pot, it's like, okay, was that a Shohin bonsai in 100% Akadama, or is it a large tree in 40% Akadama, 60% pumice? Is that a deciduous tree? Is that Yamadori? When was it collected? Like, there's just all these different variables that like are going to change so many things. It gets confusing to me. Uh, and I just don't. It's hard for me to wrap my mind around how we actually find out how much good water actually has a positive effect on our bonsai.
Yeah. Well, I mean, anecdotally, how did you see a difference in like what kind of differences in your practice did you see when you switched to RO? And with your switch to RO, are you totally stripping it down to like 0 TDS, or are you leaving in or remineralizing it all your your effluent, your water that comes out of the RO system?
So, no, I am only using a 3-stage reverse osmosis system. I believe there's 4-stage reverse osmosis systems, which actually strip it close to 0 parts per million, or what is the TDS?
Yeah, same thing. Yep.
Uh, and so mine, I want to say I can't even remember, but it's like anywhere from, and it ranges, right? Your water never stay out of the tap. Like it's always going to range a bit. I think mine ranges probably from like 300 to let's say 425 or something like that out of the tap. When I use my RO system, it's usually anywhere from, I don't know, like 30 to 60 or so. So that's like the lowest I've ever been able to get it was maybe 30. Um, And so I feel like I don't really have to worry about getting it close to distilled levels where I have to worry about leaching. But anecdotally, I do feel like I've seen a significant difference in the health and overall growth of my trees. I think mostly I can tell in deciduous trees compared with conifers. Like conifers, I can't tell as much of a difference. It seems like they're okay with bad water, quote unquote, bad water. Uh, And I don't know, like it's hard to say exactly. Just the growth seems better, seem more resistant to pest and disease, more resistant to fungal issues. Uh, I would get some weird just things with the leaves often, and then my pots would get like a white buildup on them, and I don't get all those things anymore. And so I'm definitely a fan of RO systems if your PPM or TDS is somewhat high. I just feel like it makes sense to me to strip out whatever else is in the water, not completely down to like distilled levels, or if you did that and you threw a few drops of any liquid fertilizer in your water supply, it would seem to take care of the potential leaching issues. But I feel like having clean water just makes sense in my mind, but I don't really know. But that's kind of my thoughts on water.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, yeah, I don't wanna spoil the results too soon, but because I
Yeah,
haven't done all the analysis yet. But what I'm imagining is a lot of the places that have good water are gonna be in that 30 to 100 TDS kind of stuff in them. Um, and anecdotally, what I've heard is people that are in the 300s to 500s, they're the ones who are having problems, especially with deciduous trees. So, well, let's see what the reports say, when we bring in 10 or 15 and see if there's any commonalities or not. And I imagine I mean, in US tap water, the, the dissolved solids are almost totally like calcium bicarbonate. So it's it's something that affects the pH of the solution by making it more basic. And it has, it increases the buffering capacity. So it makes the water affect the soil solution more. And but also calcium is important micronutrient for plants. So I think that 30 to 60 is maybe I don't know, but that could be a sweet spot where you're still getting that calcium, but you're not having as much of a buffering capacity on the soil, so you're not increasing the pH a ton. And so your fertilizer is more effective because your soil solution is more closely in that, like, you know, you've seen those charts where it shows the like optimal pH range for absorption of different nutrients. Um, so uh, lower pH, like in that 6.5 range, for the soil solution like is the optimal for a lot uptake of a lot of the major nutrients that we use in bonsai. So theoretically, you're decreasing the TDS in your water directly impacts those two things, and so would lead to better results potentially.
for sure. Have you tested any of your trees with apical? I feel like you could geek out on that.
I would really enjoy that. I just love having the data. I have not. Yeah, I have not. I mean, because I'm not using like the apical fertilizer system, for example.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
I mean, the idea with apical is you test your leaves or your foliage, and then you apply very targeted elemental mixes of fertilizer to optimize or like try to improve the uptake of nutrients that you're lacking or not, or like, or vice versa for stuff that you want less of, right? But I just use Miracle Grow, or like a 20 fertilizer, inorganic soluble. So I can't, if I tested, I wouldn't be able to change anything. So
Yeah,
it's not really super valuable for me to test. And maybe if I was having problems with my trees, but everything grows pretty healthily. So that's a little bit less of an incentive to like spend hundreds of dollars when, if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of thing, right? But
for
I do
sure.
like the idea of using evidence as a to make decisions and how you impact your trees. Like that is an interesting idea. I like my scientific brain that appeals to me, but um, I just haven't had to use that as a tool in my garden yet.
Yeah, totally. Very nice. Well, I guess last question regarding scientific studies. Like if you had unlimited funding and a magic wand, is there what are some things that you would love to know the results of, or what would you test?
Man, that's a tough one. I mean, I think the coolest thing would be cracking the code on how to get the densest tree possible. Like what combination of years in a pot and soil mixture and fertilization. Like I would just have hundreds of, whatever species I want to target for this analysis, like trident maple or something like that. I would just have hundreds of them from the same genetic, and I would be like trees that are pretty far along in their development process, and I would be trying to see what kind of like what helps me optimize for the type of growth that I want the most. I think that would be super cool.
Brad, I like that.
Yeah, I mean, for conifers, I feel a little bit less, I guess, about that. Like, I want it to grow healthily, but, I feel like conifers you kinda have some more control over. Like, if you do this cleaning and rebalancing process pretty well, like, you don't have a ton of unusable growth, you know what I mean? Like, a trident might send out these long shoots and then or a Japanese maple, like, might be too coarse or the internodes might be too long and you lose a bunch, but you don't really have that same, like, internode length problem with conifers with a lot of conifers, right? So, um, it's a little bit less interesting to me. I think the other thing would be trying to figure out, how to make plants more disease resistant because without spraying pesticides and fungicides. Like I rely heavily on those today, and because it works. But I don't want to get Parkinson's disease or cancer or something like that because of you know
For sure.
because of the spraying. Or my cat goes and hangs out in the garden, so like I don't want him to be impacted by that, or my wife, because the trees are right outside in my garden. So undoubtedly, like if I'm using harsh pesticides, those are getting, you know, into my system and my family's system, and like that's not worth it.
Yeah.
So um, being able to spray less or test out a variety of less like proven to be less impactful to humans pesticide methods, those would probably be like the two highest priority um, studies that I would try to pursue.
Fantastic. I would love to know those results as well. So hopefully we can find you a magic wand somewhere. Cool.
Once I retire and I have a bonsai farm or something like that, I'll take experiments under advisement.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. Well, we're already getting close to the 2-hour mark. I was thinking maybe we hit two more topics if that's okay. Kind of skipping to the
Yeah,
end. Is
sure.
that cool with you?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay. Um, I've heard you talk about on your podcast that you really love twisted junipers. I was curious, is that correct? Like, is that one of your favorite trees to play around with? And what maybe draws you to them, if that is correct? And I apologize if I was not understanding that
Hmm.
correctly.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about what this is harkening back to. I mean, I junipers and redwoods are like my two kind of focus species, so that's where I'm diving the deepest. I love the with junipers, I love shimpaku foliage, and I love the flexibility and the amount you can wring out of a design with the material, like the ability to bend it, and it's just very resilient and it grows really well in my climate. So that's definitely a big focus for me. I mean, who doesn't like twisted junipers? But I think for me, like there's two ways that I really like junipers. I really like Shohin junipers and the idea of like building these really, compact, tight uh, trees with maximum degree of interest and live and dead interaction. So I love that, and I'm trying to grow like that's my one grow project that I'm allowing myself is like crops of Itoigawa and Kishu juniper whips to create future Shohin. I just think there's a lot to learn there, right? Like the carving process and the deadwood creation process and the the like growing process. So it's just very enticing to me. Um, and then, I love Yamadori and like the design space I just love seeing old deadwood. I think you describe it like the shark skin or the dragon skin deadwood, like seeing those really unique things that you can't recreate that are one of a kind and you can build designs around, like that's peak bonsai for me. So um, those are things that I've been collecting junipers the last few years that I'm trying to learn how to make those into bonsai trees. And those are kind of that's my twisted juniper spiel. So I don't know if you want to pull anything out of that, but those are the kind of two ways that I interact with junipers today.
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic. So I also like those little twisted, like man-made Shimpaku junipers, and then I also like Yamadori junipers as well. But I kind of have them divided very much in my mind. So,
Hmm.
and I don't know if this is a great way to think about it or not, but I feel like the Yamadori collected trees, that's like I don't know, you might get mad at me for this. That's like real bonsai. And then the man-made ones, not that it's not real bonsai, but it just has a different feel. It's like an imitation of the Yamadori and it's man-made, and I feel like that's how it is. So I also can't resist twisting up a few junipers every year, and I've been making several, and I wanna some point, I wanna show you some of the ones that I have, because they're starting to look pretty cool, some of them, these little twisted projects that I've been making, but I do kinda divide them up in my mind. Would you agree with that? Do you do the same thing, or, am I talking blasphemy here?
Yeah, no, I definitely do as well. I mean, I think there's a third category, which is like the really large, like Taiwanese built, like made junipers, which I think are really impressive and get really close to looking like Yamadori. But that I just don't think there's the infrastructure here to be making those right now, right? We just don't
For
have the
sure.
raw material or like the pipeline of those trees. But um, yeah, I would say they're very different pursuits. And I think that's part of the reason why I'm pursuing them with different teachers. Like Ryan doesn't have any Shohin junipers in his collection that I'm aware of, and is not really super interested in Shohin. So I learned Chimpaku and Shohin junipers with Adam because he's really interested in it and he has a ton of them and like that's a focus area for him. And I learned a lot, but Adam can work on Yamadori, but he doesn't have a lot of Yamadori to work on. It's not a focus area for him. And I think Ryan's the best in the world, at least for like the initial creation. And well, I just think he's amazing at making Yamadori conifers. And so I focus on that with him when I'm there. So I definitely do have them segmented pretty heavily in my practice. I think there is some overlap, right? Like making a pad on a small, I mean, as long as the foliage is the same, like making a pad is similar, though like the number of pads and the degree of unification you do might be different, obviously, in a small design versus a large one. And like the carving and cleaning process is similar, though obviously at a smaller scale. So I don't know. I think there's similarities, but I definitely segment them pretty heavily in my practice into like two different domains and like areas of growth.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes total sense working on, the Shohin with Adam and the big boys with Ryan. I think it's so cool that Adam is going in really specializing in Shohin. I feel like that's, like, lacking here. Excuse me. So, I'm really excited about that and love both those guys. Where was I going? Oh, and not to say with the Shohin junipers that are man-made, you like 2 points about those. One, I feel like you can get more interest with a man-made shohin, like more twist and curve, which is like so cool, than often in the big Yamadori, but they do have a different feel. And then the second point that I wanted to make was with those little shohin trees, I do think that as time goes by and they get really old and the deadwood ages naturally, it has a lot of time to age. that they can get really cool characteristics and to a point where it looks like Yamadori with the passage of a lot of time. However, still divide them up very much into like two different things. I feel like in Japan, the man-made ones are like way less valuable, where Yamadori is worth way more. Over here, it's kind of different because we don't really have those man-made things. So like maybe there's a big market for them, and I think they're just less common over here. But super fun to create, that's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been seeing some of your pictures. I feel like you've posted a few pictures of them on Instagram, and I was eyeing them. They're ones in the ground and stuff. I just really like that's something that when I went to Gafuten, those really spoke to me, and I wanted to have those when I got home, and nobody was making them. So if there's no pipeline, then I got to make them myself. So I started learning that, and I've had a lot of fun with that. And it's just like a fun. I personally enjoy working on them more than large trees, just because it's a little bit less of a time investment. And I'm fine that I'm like getting better at it a little bit faster. Like a lot of the structural work with really big trees is difficult, and it's harder to get reps on, and so I'm learning a little slower. Um, so I don't know, I'm just having fun with it, and want to make cool little Shohin junipers. Yeah, I guess there is like a large market for it, but I'm not really doing it at a scale that's gonna like I'm just doing it for myself. Maybe I'll sell the ones that I like don't catch my mind as much of my kind of crops of them.
Yeah,
But it's fun to do. So
awesome. How do you decide like how do you learn or how do you decide to put movement into them, or what's your approach to putting movement into them? Because I think that's kind of just an interesting subject.
mm, yeah, so I essentially um yeah, no, this is all stuff that I've learned from Adam. He's definitely the guy to go to for this because he was making them with taiga, and taigas taigas are the ones that I fell in love with when I was in Japan. So he was definitely the right source of this information. Taiga had Shohin junipers in Kokufu 100 that won the show. So I got to see them at his garden after, like right up close, right in front of my face after the show, which was fun.
That's rad.
Um, yeah, so twisting up junipers. I mean, essentially, uh, I take them whenever they're kind of like a lot of people twist them up too soon. You want them to be pretty thick already, like just thick enough that well, it depends on what size you're aiming for, right? If you're aiming for mame, you can maybe twist them up whenever they're smaller because you want even more insane movement. But like the, and I guess take all this with a caveat of like, I haven't successfully made top tier Shohin junipers yet. So this is what I'm doing now, but who knows if it'll work out. But this is what I've learned, and this is what I've kind of captured so far from my studies here and in Japan. A lot of the best ones, like the ones that really capture me, are like actually big trees that they, you know, totally carved down. Like these are trees that are, chuhin or bigger sized trees that they're 2 inches thick trunk at the base that they're kind of really paring back a lot of material, right? We just don't have a lot of that stuff. So I'm kind of approaching it from starting them from whips, growing them for a long time in pots, and then I might have slightly smaller, like they might not be like the top end of Shohin size, like kind of edging into Kifu, which is where a lot of the really compelling ones for me are. Um, but they might end up being in the like more fully Shohin size, is what my expectation of this, but we'll see. But yeah, so because I'm not growing them in the ground, they're probably not going to get that trunk caliper in an appreciable time frame. So yeah, whenever they're about a kind of my pinky finger thick, I will twist them up. You have to think about what you're trying to accomplish, right? In general, junipers are used, Shohin junipers are used on the outside of the box, and they're very directional, right? So you're almost always going to want something that has a lot of movement in it and leans over to the left or to the right, depending on which direction you're going, right? So um, I almost always am adding some sort of, I try to vary whether I'm applying my wire clockwise or counterclockwise so that I can have a variety of end shapes as well. Because I found myself at the beginning in my first crop, I always applied the wire with the same way, and I ended up with the same directionality in the tree, right? So that's something to think about too. But try to alternate that, and then I twist the trunk, and I just try to add what I think is going to be an interesting line. I tried to like trace lines from trees in Kokufu and things like that, and then make that line as the like center line of my tree too. But I don't know how to describe like interesting movement, and I'm not the best at creating it. But I try to make interesting movement that will grow and can get. You have to keep in mind that you want it to be a little bit less. Like it can't be too squiggly, or when it thickens, it's all going to merge together, right? So you have to keep in mind if you want a bigger shohin, then you have to make the curves a little bit less. It can't be like a spaghetti. Um, and then the secret though is you got to twist it. So as you're twisting the tree in like this corkscrew or whatever, you also have to make sure that the foliage and the tissue is twisting. I mean, there's a fine line between like killing the tree and adding that twist, but really whenever you pull your fibers like really far down the line in your process, you want the fibers to naturally twist around the trunk, right? And so you have to build if you just end up adding movement into the trunk and the you don't add any movement radially within the trunk. I don't know if that's the right way to describe that, but hopefully that makes sense. Then whenever you naturally pull the tree, the fibers are going to be straight as well, right? And you want some degree of twist to the fibers. So I try to add that twisting in. And then, yeah, I just twist it up, just the main trunk line whenever I'm doing the first like twist up of the whip. And then down the line, I add movement to the next sections, right, as those start to thicken. But yeah, that's kind of my basic process.
Very nice. I like it. I feel like when people are twisting up the junipers, I almost feel like you don't want to overthink it so that you kind of do this exact same approach or put the exact same movement into it. Like, I'm not sure if that is correct or not, but that's kind of how I think about it. Like, I don't necessarily, I almost like don't think about it too much. I just bend it in funky shapes and add lots of twist and curve. I almost think it's impossible to actually predict what the end tree is going to look like from like the first twist. Like I just don't know how you could know. And so I guess my thought, like I wonder if even like a taiga knows if he's putting that first twist in, he's like, okay, this is what it's gonna look like eventually. um I feel like
I would say no. I
yeah,
would say no because like even when I'm working with Adam, he's going, okay, I don't know where the front's going to be at all. I'm just trying to add some interesting movement that has the possibility to age into something cool. And then whenever I actually get to the styling process, like it could be a totally new tree to me that I've never seen before. Like I'm deciding on the front there. It wasn't grown in its, you know, intended front, right? So
totally. Yeah. Yeah, so I feel like you know what type of movement should go into the trunk, but not necessarily what the exact final result would be. That would be almost impossible to predict. One thing that I've really thought about when it comes to growing trunks is that you want to cull down. So, like starting with a large number and then over time refining that, I think that makes a lot of logical sense to me. So, like, if you want to get to ten junipers, maybe you should start with like 120 or something like that, and then maybe every couple years weed a few out. That's hard to do because it requires more space and things like that. But I do feel like if you really want to get to like an awesome end result, like you're going to have a few absolute gems out of the batches that you have. So like personally, I'm all about like culling down as a strategy for growing trunks.
yeah, I think that makes sense. I the other thing I'm trying to do is, and this was actually inspired by you, is I need to start like if I just start growing these, it's going to be 30 years before I, have a finalized example. So, and I won't be, I won't be know that I'm actually good at making the final part of it without, having those examples. So I've been trying to buy the top examples of these that I see, and invest more in my collection so that not only do I have these ones that I'm growing, but I have these ones that are examples of what I'm trying to get to, right? And not in a disingenuous way of like, oh, this is what I've made, but like, you know, you have to have these things in all stages of development. And if you wait 20 years for it to get to the stage when you start making an actual tree out of it, then like, you know, that that's probably not the best way to get to that collection, right? You can develop your practice a lot more and learn a lot more and make a better end product by having things in all those stages so that you learn the lessons hopefully in advance of how you should be growing them to get the product that you want.
Beautiful. Love to hear it. And I'm glad I encouraged you to spend more money. I hope your wife is good with that as well. uh, fantastic. Fantastic. Well, yeah, I think that's great. Like I do think you are clearly extremely passionate about bonsai. And so I feel like you should put financial resources into obtaining really high quality material and you'll get a lot from that. So I like it. Nice. Okay. Well, I think there was one more thing, unless there was anything else you wanted to hit on regarding junipers.
No, this has been super fun. Yeah.
Cool, cool. Okay. Well, I guess the last thing or topic that I wanted to hit on was bonsai clubs. And so maybe let me start, and then I have some questions for you. So essentially, at some point in my lifetime, I would really like to get a club going on here on the Central Coast. Like, I really would love to get help develop, play a leadership role, and help develop a club or some type of bonsai crew here on the Central Coast. And I think I want to do it in a club format. However, I like to really think about not necessarily how things have been going previously, but like I almost want to start from scratch. And like I think that there are problems with bonsai clubs, but then they can also be really beneficial. And so I guess what I'm trying to do is create like the ideal bonsai club if I were to start a bonsai club. Probably not going to do this for another 10, 15 years or so, but eventually I'd really like to have a club here on the Central Coast. My kind of thought, and I wanted to get your feedback on this, is I really liked the way that Boone had his club structure. So he had Bay Island Bonsai back in the day. Shout out to Boone. There are a few things that I loved about what Boone was doing. Like, one, he had the whole club centered around the idea of having a club show. And so I think for me, if I had a club, I would probably want people to submit trees to the Pacific Bonsai Expo. And then that would be like the end goal kind of thing, right? Get a crew submitting trees up to the Pacific Bonsai Expo. But then kind of secondarily, maybe we would have a club show every like 2 or 3 years or so. And we would also like a local club show, we would show trees there. I would say I would like probably paid workshops. Um, and I would really like to, well, actually, I'm going to stop right there. um, what do you think about a structure like that? Or, and how's clubs been for you currently? I think I asked you too many questions there.
No, no, yeah. I mean, it's really cool to hear about your dream for a club. I think the most important thing to making that successful is finding, well, I mean, again, limited experience, but I think the most important thing that stuck out to me is like what makes that magical, what you just described, is the group of people that come together with a shared goal to make it happen, right? No, what I've learned from doing a club, and I've been on the board for the East Bay Club for 6 or 7 years now, and I'm been the president the last 2 years and the vice president the year before that, um, is that really one man or one person can't make a club. Or I mean, you can, but it's just you got to be really committed, and it's going to take a large amount of your time, right? And so, really, what the club becomes is not just dependent on this one hero figure, but dependent on the people that make it up and their interests too. So I would leave some degree of flexibility in your end design for the democratic approach of like, what do people actually want to do? You can just be that one strong figure, but then the club kind of lives and dies with you and your effort, right? And that may or may not be something that you want to take on, right? Yeah, your question about like, what do I think of that structure? To me, that's a very appealing structure, right? That's a very cool, like, I think that drives people to get better at bonsai and like doing bonsai because they've got this demonstratable artifact of like a tree in a show that they're aiming for and they get feedback against that goal, right? I'd say that the majority of practitioners, at least in my club, 95% would not be that kind of practitioner, right? And so you have to see, like, in your area, is there demand for that, right? Are there enough people interested, and like, does it meet the kind of size or scale that you want to be sustainable? Like, are there enough people that are willing to be a part of that and fund it to have that outcome, right? There's always that kind of challenge. The East Bay Club, for example, is a social club first and a bonsai club second, I'd say, almost. So it's a little bit of an interesting dichotomy because it's almost the opposite, right? Like when I joined the club, I I almost felt like I felt this really strong push to try to make everyone practitioners. And there is a lot of interest in that. But for like this long-standing club, um, there's a lot of history with the club and there's these relationships that have been built amongst club members over this 25, 30 years of being in the club and a club that's been around for, 60 years. So I think me like taking on a leadership role within the East Bay Club, I kind of had to temper my expectations of like what I wanted and find out like what did the membership want, right? To make it a really magical place to grow bonsai and be true to maybe not my mission necessarily, but the mission of the club, right? For it to be a sustainable and long-lived endeavor. So I don't know, that's my 2 cents initially, but I would love to get deeper into this topic with kind of what you want to build and
Yeah.
strategize around it.
Well, thank you very much for that feedback. And I don't have a whole lot of so I don't have a whole lot of experience with bonsai clubs. I have uh, a little bit of experience with the Santa Maria Bonsai Club, like way back when I first got into bonsai, and then I was in Bay Island Bonsai for a few years. And so I guess one thing that I've been thinking about a lot lately is, um, so one of my hobbies is jujitsu. I love doing jujitsu, and there are jujitsu clubs, but I think I want to structure my club, which maybe I'm not even calling it a club, more like a jujitsu gym. So if you think about if if a person started a jujitsu club, it would be like a bunch of individuals coming together to practice jujitsu. There's not necessarily one like leader, but they vote on how things are going to be governed and run. Whereas with a jujitsu gym, most jujitsu gyms, you pay a membership. There's very structured instructions and lessons, basically. And I think over time, what I've seen with my jujitsu gym is it started with one individual, and that individual started teaching the students and developing the next crop of teachers and instructors. And then now those people start teaching, and then people come up under that second generation of teachers, and then those people start teaching. And I think my goals would be really to make the biggest impact on San Luis Obispo County and Santa Barbara County as possible. And so I think it would be really cool if I started teaching workshops. We had a club though, and then I could eventually make it to where we had kind of like second generation teachers and third generation teachers But I do want to make it very structured and formatted, kind of like Bay Island Bonsai was. Um, but I also think you brought up a very interesting point in that, like, it lives and dies by the one person, which is maybe something that even if it starts with the one person, maybe you can create enough structure that it would live past you. Unfortunately, like I don't think there's Bay Island Bonsai anymore. Uh, I'm not sure 100%, but I'm bummed about that. It was a phenomenal club. I thought it was such a good club, and I thought they did incredible things. And Boone had just a really high level show for a club show all the time, and I think he made just a very massive impact on the people that were part of that club. And so I look up to that very much so, and like I think that I would structure it like that. Now it was maybe more of like his business was part of the club. So I guess there's a big difference between like a business club and just like your traditional club. I don't know if you have any thoughts on any of that.
Yeah, I mean, the Bay Island bonsai, like, is almost a mythical existence from my perspective.
Yeah.
Like, I've just heard so many of the people that I respect so much came through that club, like you and Jonas and Eric, and there's all these people who that club had such a big influence and impact on them, and they're the people that are in that, that tier of people who, like, they caught the bonsai itch and, like, they wanna do it, you know? They wanna dedicate themselves to it. So, I it seems like the perfect environment to foster similar kinds of people, right? And so I love that, and I think that model of I think modeling it around showing is very smart. Not because, like, showing is the ultimate form of bonsai, but it gives you a barometer and, like, a very tangible thing to plan and structure your curriculum, and it gives you a very tangible mission, right? Which is cool. And, like, that mission also leads to higher quality bonsai, right? Which is, in general, laudable. The kinda 2 models I've seen are, like, a general social club that maybe doesn't drive the best bonsai creation or, like, the best practitioners, but, you know, plugs along and people have fun. And then I've also seen, like, sensei-led, like the Johnny Uchidas or the Yamato Club and the Boone with the Bay Island Bonsai. So they're built around this kinda central figure that decides the direction and provides the teaching and, like, I guess, like, the sensei or the dojo type approach. And I think both of those are really cool, and I think probably the, like, sensei-led type approach is better for, like, building practitioners or, like, enhancing the quality of bonsai, but I think they both have a place to fit into you know, the zeitgeist or whatever. They both have a place to fill in the bonsai ecosystem, which is cool. But yeah, I mean, what you described, like, that would be ideal to me. Like, for me as a practitioner, that would be the kind of club that I'd want to be a part of and would want to, have a space to enjoy those types of things with other people. So I love that goal.
Nice. Yeah, I don't know, is club the right word for a teacher-led, you know, club? And then it seems like, to me, a good bonsai club has to have good people at the top, like figuring things out, organizing things, and whether that's one or like a few, it seems like that is very, very important. There's people at the top, like putting things together, doing things the right way, really putting in some hard work is kind of my thought.
Yeah, well, I think if that's an interesting one. I mean, I think if you're capturing like having a CEO or a leader figure, and, like, if you need technical skill to, you know, accomplish your vision, then obviously that person's very important. Like, that technical ability or that that leadership is important in that sense, right? But I think like a healthy club is one in which the the goal aligns with what the people in the club want to do, and then they're passionate about volunteering to make that happen, or they're passionate about their relationships with each other and the space that they're able to build. So I think
Great point.
that's something you want to, because it's just so much work to run a club. And so you really need, it does take a village. And so, how do you make sure that people are engaged? I think it's through like those one-on-one connections with people. Um, and and then making sure that they're getting their needs met, right? So it's almost like there's a two-way street of like, yes, a sensei can provide a lot of value and can be really important in the execution of something, but the relationships amongst the members and with the sensei are just as important. And you're the what the club is can kind of morph with what the people that make it up want to do, because it's not such a large group where it's like thousands of people in a club, and you know it's manageable of like, oh, here's what the people that are in the club actually want to do, and like this is what this person that steps up, they're really passionate about X, and they're going to add this whole nother layer of depth and richness to the club because they do that function within it. So um yeah, I like that idea, and like the structure that you've kind of talked about to me is very interesting. You might want to talk to I did an episode with John from, I think, High Desert Bonsai, the guy in Idaho, who he has that kind of model where he provides a bonsai farm essentially, that people come and work at his garden, and he kind of provides the instruction, and it's like a win-win, right? Where he provides this space and opportunity to work on trees, and that helps drive practitioners in the area and like improve everyone. And then, there's the benefit of his trees move along and he gets help with the work he needs. So that kind of like community space based or like garden based approach to development, it might be good to connect with him. He's really open to talking. I thought his description of the community that he was fostering was really powerful. So
Yeah. Sweet. I like it. Yeah. I was wondering with you, like, what keeps you going to the club? What do you enjoy? What do you find valuable within your bonsai club? And are you part of one club?
mm, I'm just part of one club. I moved from Oakland to San Francisco, but I just the San Francisco meetings are one day after the Oakland meetings, and I've been in the Oakland club so long, and I really enjoy the people there, and so I've kind of just stuck with it. What keeps me in the club? I mean, I I just really enjoy the people. Like the people that I've met there are just such great people, um, and I don't really like doing bonsai alone, to be honest. So, so there's like 100% chance that I would be so much less engaged in bonsai if, I didn't become friends with Sam and like work with him on the weekends or other people in the bonsai club. So, I think those relationships and, um, do I think that being in the bonsai club makes me a much better practitioner? Probably not, but indirectly, I'm making relationships with people that help me, form a deeper relationship and help me keep my drive for getting better at bonsai because I'm a part of this community that, I have a place within. And so that like community building aspect is really important to me because I want to try to retire early and I need to have stuff to do, and like I found a community that I really like and I enjoy the people and I want to spend time with them. And, you know, if I'm not working anymore and I don't have coworkers to interact with and things like that, like this is the community that I've found that I really like. And so I think that's what it is about for me is like I just enjoy it and it fits into an important place in my life that I need to fill.
Love it. Love it. People are important. Good people, surrounding yourself with good people is a very important thing. I think there's some quote like, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time around. I think I agree with that. And I also think that you are the average of the people that you spend the most time around. Like I think it like expands out, and I just think people rub off on you more than we might realize. And you become those people in certain ways, especially if you spend a lot of time with them. So I think it's so important to, if you find good people, stick with them. So like to hear it. That's awesome.
100% agree. 100% agree.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I find so much of my motivation for improvement comes because I'm inspired by the people that I look up to, you know?
Yeah.
So finding those people and latching onto them is for me at least helps drive me like actually getting better at things as opposed to just relying solely on my intrinsic motivation, you know? So I like that.
Yeah, absolutely. It does seem like there are some really thriving clubs in the United States, which is really exciting to hear. Like, for example, the one that I hear about a lot is the uh, Portland Club, the Portland Bonsai Society. Is that what they're called?
Yeah, they've got like 600 plus members or something like that, and they're
That's
just popping. That's like the
nuts.
bonsai mecca in the US, I feel like. They've got a good thing going.
Yeah, I that is really cool. Like, I mean, like, does it that seems like a really fun club. Like, I would be part of that club if I wish I had something like that going down here, but looks like they just always have really cool events and things going on. So that's very exciting to see.
100%. Yeah. I keep I'm trying to get my wife to go up to Portland with me to like check out the area because hey, if we ended up living in the bonsai village up there, I'd be okay with that.
Nice,
But
nice.
yeah, I would love in my like ultimately wherever I settle down to have like a contingent of folks who are really serious about bonsai. Um, and not, we don't have to be neighbors, but having people within, 15, 20 minutes that kind of share that passion and we can kind of feed off of each other, I think would be awesome.
Yeah, most definitely, most definitely. Awesome, man. Well, before we close out here, I guess, is there anything else that you wanted to hit on or any other topics that you're interested in chatting about?
No, I think we covered a lot of really cool stuff. I really always enjoy the conversations with you. So thanks for having me on the podcast. And yeah, I, uh, I think I've got some interesting ideas for some like podcast swaps and things we can do to keep it fresh as we keep building these over the next, hopefully next 60 years. Well, I guess podcasts will probably be defunct by that point, but who knows? We'll see.
That'd be interesting. They'll all
You'll
be
just directly imbibe the
yeah.
knowledge into your brain through a chip or something like that. But
Yep, yep, yep. Cool. Well, I'm game for those ideas. Sounds like fun, and I really appreciate you on here. I love chatting with you. I really love what you're doing. Like you are doing such a good job. You really are. You're absolutely crushing it. Please keep it up. I just enjoy listening every week. And really appreciate your time, man. Thank you so much. And I hope to see you around soon. We're not that far away. I'm sure we'll see each other soon and at least at the next PVE.
100%, 100%.
Cool.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, thank you. It really means a lot to me. Where like I see your podcast as like the the gold standard, like the goal that I'm aiming for. So mine's been 100% inspired by you. So I really appreciate it. And uh, you know, yeah, it's fun having. I take things from your episodes, and those become conversations that I have in my episodes. So it's really nice having someone in the trenches with me, and I look up to your practice a lot and learn a lot from it. So
Uh,
thank you, Jeremiah, and looking forward to being friends for a long time.
Absolutely, man. You're too kind. Thank you so much. Have a great evening. Have a great weekend. Talk to you soon, man.
You too. Bye.